Council meeting for January 13th, 2020. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Hoffman?
Here.
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. Tonight's invocation will be led by Pastor Jason Allison from Press Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all please rise. I apologize.
Go right ahead, Ms. Mayor. Father God, I thank you for this night. As you told us in your word that we are to pray for those who are in leadership, pray for those who are in government. And so tonight it is my honor and privilege to do that, Father. So I thank you for the many blessings that you have put on this local community. I pray for those who are in this office that govern this community, that they may make wise decisions, godly decisions. I pray that they would always be able to see what is best for this community, for all of us, that we may know you, that we may see your blessing in all that happens. Father, I pray for law enforcement as they risk themselves to protect us and to watch over us. I ask you to lead them and to protect them. Father, I thank you for all of the first responders who serve so diligently and run into the fire instead of away, that we may all be protected. Father, I ask you now to watch over this meeting, that it would help further this city, that it would become an even greater place, and that we would all grow to continue and love this place even more, because you have blessed it in so many ways. So watch over us now, protect and lead us in your ways. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of motion summary. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Approval of the motion summary of the year-end meeting of council held on December 19th, 2019, as recorded and transcribed.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, resolution number 20-01, a resolution appointing council members to various committees, commissions, and/or boards. Item B, resolution number 20-02, a resolution canceling the second regular meeting of City Council May 25th, 2020 due to the Memorial Day holiday. Item C, resolution number 20-03, a resolution appointing members to various boards, commissions, and/or committees and specifying the term of the appointment. Item D, resolution number 20-04, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a programmatic agreement between the City of Delaware and the Ohio State Historic Preservation Office to renew delegated environmental review responsibilities expiring December 31st, 2024. Item E, resolution number 20-05, a resolution approving a traffic calming pilot program for Carson Farms Boulevard. And item F, resolution number 20-06, a resolution approving a traffic calming pilot program for Cobblestone Drive.
Thank you.
Move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. I was going to point out on your boards and commission, as you go to these meetings, when we come to the following council meeting, I would really ask that you start giving reports so that you are the liaison between us, so that we don't always have to type it in and watch. So it'd be appreciated if we could start that this year, trying a little harder to give those reports. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, or public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Okay, seeing none, I don't think there's been any committee reports, so we're just going to skip right over that part. Item 8 is a presentation. Maria is here to give us a presentation on the MORPSI 2020 through 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Maria, if you could come forward at this time, and I apologize for my voice.
Just give us 1 second. They'll turn on. You can have a seat.
Okay. And you can move that microphone down closer, and if you'll give us your name and address for the record before we get started also.
Sure. I'm Maria Shopper with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. We're at 111 Liberty Street in Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you.
Okay, well, good evening. Thank you for having me. Again, I'm Maria Shopper, Transportation Planning Manager with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. And thank you for allowing me the time to come speak to you tonight about transportation, regional transportation priorities. So, in case you are need a little refresher on who MORPSI is, we are Central Ohio's regional council. We're made up of over 70 members, including counties, cities, villages, townships, and other regional organizations. And we bring communities together over through a variety of programs and services in the areas of transportation, planning and sustainability, data and mapping, residential services, government affairs, and communications. But tonight I'm here to talk to you about the 2020 to 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or we call this the MTP for short. And this is a plan that sets the framework for regional transportation investments over the next 20 to 30 years. This is a fiscally constrained plan, meaning that the projects that are included in this plan must be fiscally feasible based on project level cost estimates and a revenue forecast that we do looking out to the year 2050. And we do this plan every 4 years, and it's submitted to ODOT and USDOT. So this plan covers the metropolitan planning area, which is shown, or are all the areas shown in green and gray on the map. And this is our metropolitan planning organization boundary, which is based upon the census urbanized area, and it corresponds and with the area in which our federal transportation dollars are able to be spent. So for Central Ohio, this includes all of Franklin and Delaware counties and parts of Union, Licking, and Fairfield counties. So why is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan important? One of the most important reasons that it's important to your community is that transportation projects must be included in this plan in order to be eligible for federal funding. This is really to ensure that the federal transportation dollars are being spent on projects that have been identified as regional priorities. And an equally important factor is that, as I know you're very well aware, is the growth that is currently facing Central Ohio. And for the past 5 years, everyone's been talking about how much Central Ohio is growing. And we're now the most populous region in the state, while much of the rest of the state is either experiencing flat and sometimes negative growth. So we're actually expecting over 600,000 people to come to our region in the next 30 years. And by 2050, we're also expecting nearly 300,000 new jobs to be added to Central Ohio. So this means that many more people and goods are going to be traveling to, through, and within our region. We also know that people want different things today than they wanted 20 or 30 years ago. While some people do still want to drive their cars, we are seeing demographics change as we get older. We are getting older, we're getting younger, and with those changing demographics, our preferences are changing. People are looking to, they'd like to be able to walk to the park, or ride their bike or take transit to the grocery store or a medical appointment. So this research and these changing demographics are, we use this to identify 6 goals that we are basing this Metropolitan Transportation Plan on. And these are 6 very broad vision statements. They cover 6 topic areas, including reducing per capita energy consumption, protecting natural resources, positioning Central Ohio to attract and retain economic opportunity. We want to create sustainable neighborhoods, increase regional collaboration, and use public investments to benefit the health, safety, and welfare of people. This slide here shows the process that, a general overview of the process MORPSI staff has gone through to develop this Metropolitan Transportation Plan. It represents about 2 years' worth of work, and we are still working on it. But we start with by reviewing all of the local plans within our region. We look at local land use plans, local transportation plans, and thoroughfare plans. We also do a lot of public engagement, which I'll detail a little bit later. And we use all of this to develop a set of goals, objectives, and targets that this plan is based upon. We then use all of that information, and we do a lot of analyses. We develop evaluation criteria. So I mentioned that the plan is fiscally constrained. So when we look at all of these projects that we've identified, that have been identified locally throughout the region, we realize that we won't be able to afford all of them. So we have to come up with a way to choose the projects that are best going to help the region meet the goals that we've established. So we identify evaluation criteria and apply that evaluation criteria. We also do a fiscal analysis, so we develop cost estimates for each of the plans, or each of the projects, and do a revenue forecast. So we look at historically what our region has received at the federal and state levels, look at what our local communities have invested in the past, and develop, what do we think is a reasonable forecast of funding that will be available to us. And then we also do impact analyses, so we look at how do these projects impact air quality, the environment, transportation disadvantaged populations, and we put all that together, and the output is what most people are interested in, and that is a document that lists a set of regional strategies as well as priority projects and a map. So that's what I know everyone is mostly interested in. So just a little bit about how we, I mentioned we did extensive public engagement, and one activity that we did was we developed a web map, an interactive web map, where we invited, first we showed all of the projects that we had found when we looked through all of the local plans. So we showed those on a map, so these are what we call candidate projects. And we invited the public or anyone to visit the website. You could click on the projects, make a comment on the projects, and you could also suggest your own project. And what we found through that process was that the public is highly interested in building bike and pedestrian projects and transit projects. And this also confirmed, the research I was talking about earlier, that people want choice, they want viable transportation options. So we're using this information as we develop the strategies and the draft project list. So this is a screenshot of so I mentioned we update this plan every 4 years, and so the previous plan was the 2016 to 2040 plan. So these are the projects that were included the previous round for the city of Delaware, and we started with these as the base for, these were all candidate projects that we are reevaluating for inclusion in the plan. And then there were also several projects that were identified by the public as well. So we also are looking at regional strategies. So the strategies are identified in 2 different categories. We're identifying system management strategies, which is really looking at our existing system and how we can preserve the physical preservation, so our roads and bridges, making sure they're in great condition. Also looking at how we can operate our existing facilities more efficiently. So that could be anything from like the Smart Lane project down on 670. That was utilizing the shoulder of that roadway without adding new capacity. It could be where appropriate, looking at a roadway that has maybe 4 or 5 lanes for vehicle travel, and maybe if it's appropriate at that location, looking at and reducing that number and adding maybe a 2-way turn lane or bike lanes or a multi-use path within that right-of-way. So using that existing facility more efficiently. We're always looking at safety and security strategies as well as demand management. So how do we manage the demand of the system by reducing single occupancy vehicles and encouraging carpools and other modes of transportation. So the next category of strategies we look at are system development. So we are growing and we are going to have to build more infrastructure. So these strategies include expanding the bike and pedestrian infrastructure, transit, freight rail, multimodal infrastructure connections, as well as roadway infrastructure. So we are out beginning in December and through February. We are visiting all of the local communities, councils, boards, commissions, neighborhoods, as many groups who will have us, just to let you all know that this is coming. The draft list of projects is not yet available. It should be available within the next week or so, but I did want to take the opportunity to come before you and just explain the process, explain why it's important to your community, and let you know that we are looking for your feedback. So again, between now and February, we are out doing community presentations, so there will be a draft document available in February to review. On February 26th, we'll be having an open house at Morpsey's offices down in the Brewery District. We'll have boards and staff members available to come talk to. I'm open to the public, so if you'd like to share that and help spread the word, I'd appreciate that. And then we're taking comments through April 3rd of this year, and then we will be taking the plan to our board for adoption in May of this year. So here, again, what are we asking of you? To review the draft plan. So we'll be, within the next week or so, we'll be releasing a draft list of just the strategies and the projects on our website, and the draft projects will be viewable on that same web map that we had used before. And that opens the public comment period, and if you would like hard copies, you can contact me, or that mtp@morpsey.org comes directly to me. We have our hard copies and translated materials available, and more general MTP information can be found on our website. And with that, I am happy to take questions if you have them.
I think it'd be helpful, Maria, maybe if you go back to the MTP projects, and I know Bill has been involved in this in his role as a member of the Transportation Committee. And maybe, Bill, I don't know, it's just an opportunity obviously for the new council members, but just kind of the projects that we're looking at there have been on our thoroughfare plan and the county's thoroughfare plan. Maybe you could just kind of high level, just kind of review what those are.
Sure, they've been on for a few generations of the MTP, working with Maria Morpsey. The projects are the ones we've been talking about in most of our transportation initiatives, just kind of moving around. Houck Road widening at some point. Valley Side Drive is next to that. Projects along the main corridors in yellow are Central Avenue improvement widenings, both east and west of town. Merrick Parkway extension you see to the north, not only from its current terminus to Troy, but all the way over to 23 to line up with the Panhandle Bridge. Some form of connection on the northeast side back down to 36, whether we call it a bypass or connector or parkway, something's in there. The Point project and the improvements on 36 have been in there for a while. And then the southeast bypass project has been in this program for well over a decade, probably longer than that. And then Glen Parkway extension to the south coming north. Those are projects you hear about all the time that we're working on, but as Maria said, if it's not on this plan, it doesn't get funds. So it's really important for projects to be on here and to receive public comment and support. So we'll add the links to Access Delaware, try to get the word out that we'd like public to look at this and add some comments in. And you're all welcome to make comments as well. In all my time with Morpsey, it's amazing how few comments we do get on this MTP. And this affects all of Central Ohio, Delaware and Franklin County. I forget what you said, almost 1,800 projects plus or minus on this plan. And sometimes we get a handful of comments. So it's really important to comment on it. But largely, you're seeing snapshots of things that are on our transportation plan locally, but these are ones that would be federally eligible for federal funds. So small little intersection improvements you're not going to see on this plan.
I'll just add, thank you for that thorough description, but I wanted to just clarify that, I say this is a fiscally constrained plan, but it doesn't mean that these projects that you see or that eventually make it into the plan are funded. So it means that they have been identified as regional priorities, so they are eligible for federal funding, but it would still be up to the city prioritize further that project and seek funding, whether that be through MORPC attributable funding or elsewhere. This just gives us the authorization, for lack of a better term, to use federal funds on that project.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for this, it's very useful. Any comments from council members?
I have a question. So, you mentioned that because this is a fiscally constrained plan, but it has to be in the plan if we want to get federal funding for it. I don't, and you talked about the idea of demand management, reducing the use of automobiles. I don't see any, it looks like maybe, I don't see anything that might be considered maybe a dream project, maybe a dream type, passenger rail system or whatever that, because I'm just looking at something here that I saw some transportation nerd create up on the internet about a rail line that would go from, it starts down in Columbus, goes up through Delaware, connects all the way up to Bowling Green. A dream project like that, if it's not in the plan, if it couldn't possibly attract, if there's positive public comment or what have you.
Right. So that's a great question. And it is tricky. It's very tricky because the plan does have to be fiscally constrained. How do we address that and how can we, be leaders in that sense? So, so if you look at our candidate projects map, you will see there's many public suggestions for mass rail or mass transportation within our region and connecting our region to others. So we're still working on exactly how we're going to address that. What I can say is, so previously we put those corridors in the plan, but with the understanding that they weren't fiscally constrained, but we drew the lines on the map to kind of show here's where the routes that are the public and others are interested in, but they will require further study. So this time around, there's been a little more work. I don't know if you're familiar with MORPC's corridor concepts study. So that study was looking at 5 corridors within Franklin County for the most part, and just looking at what those were considered pilot corridors. So and they were representative of the region, not necessarily, these are the 5 corridors, but, we didn't identify a specific mode, and we likely won't be identifying a specific mode in this plan, but we will be identifying corridors that we think are priorities for what we call high capacity transit. So meaning anything better than a more premium service than buses. So I guess sorry, this is a long-winded answer, but as far as bus service goes, you won't see specific bus routes in this plan just because those change every 3 months sometimes, and within the context of the long range, it doesn't really make sense. You'll see funding that we've allocated for that, but so we include high capacity transit, and I think we're leaning towards looking at those, identifying a level of investment that we think our region can invest in over the next 30 years, and identifying, okay, if we got, we can assume, okay, we get X amount of a grant from FTA that comes with it, there'll be a 20% match, so we'd have to include that in our forecast. So I think we will identify some corridors, the potential corridors, and a level of investment in those corridors without necessarily identifying a specific mode or exactly which corridors that investment will go in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the rail that they keep talking about in Marysville, is that just a dream, or have you?
Hyperloop?
Yeah.
Is that, there's a lot of activity going on with Hyperloop, and I've had the chance to hear the CEO of Hyperloop speak. I know MORPC has brought a lot of Central Ohio leaders out to the test track out in Nevada. So I don't think it's a dream. I think there's a lot of planning going on, and like everything else, it's a funding issue. So there seems to be a lot of different grant opportunities that have been sought after, and so I think it will be just, baby steps, it's a project that big is, have to, yeah, like I said, baby steps, but, there's work on it, and it is moving, pieces and parts are moving forward, I will say.
Thank you.
Sure.
What in terms of US 23? We had talked about that. I know I shared that work that MKSK did in terms of that as a corridor. Is it just traffic management, or?
So as of now, I think what we look at is, we call it access management. So really managing the access points
Okay.
and consolidating driveways and such. But again, these projects at this point are very conceptual. So
Right.
especially one like that is, when we're looking that far ahead, you can't be too detailed. And even if there are certain projects that at this point the plans are detailed, and we think this is what's going to be built, maybe 7-10 years from now, when it actually does get built, maybe the alignment's different, or
Right, okay.
the specific improvement is different. So, and I think, with 23 being such a long, a very long corridor in our region, and a main corridor in our region, it's hard to identify the really specific improvements as far as access management goes. But by having that project shown on the map there with funding, showing that it's a priority, it holds that spot for it to be looked at further and and more further developed.
Sure, okay. Because it indicates going from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, so it's one of the projects
Okay.
in there. So
In
I think
the
it's 872 or something.
okay,
Okay, thanks.
sure.
So what about conversion of like existing rail infrastructure or anything like that to support commuters versus freight only?
Yeah, that's always an option that I think is on the table and looked at. It involves bringing the railroads to the table, and
That's always fun.
And they're so good to work with.
right. So, but I guess I can't say anymore. I don't think that's anything that is automatically not on the table. But as you mentioned, it can be.
Adds layers of complication.
Yes, exactly.
Any other comments? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for having me.
We'll help try to push this word out, and
Okay, and I will make sure that I email probably both of you directly with the actual draft list of projects is on the map and available, so.
Okay,
you should
great.
have that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 9 is consideration of a liquor permit transfer. Elaine, if you'll please read this in the record.
Okay. Consideration of a liquor permit transfer from Asahi Japanese Steakhouse LLC, doing business as Asahi Japanese Steakhouse at 1139 Columbus Pike, Delaware, Ohio 43015, to Asahi Restaurant Group LLC, doing business as Asahi Japanese Restaurant at 1139 Columbus Pike, Delaware, Ohio. Permit classes D1, D2, and D3.
Thank you. Chief?
Madam Mayor, members of council, for consideration is a liquor permit transfer. This is a simple transfer from one managing partner to another, and they've slightly changed the LLC. The business will remain the same, the operation will remain the same. No issue with the new managing partner, no issue with the business, and we recommend approval without objection.
Very good.
Move for approval of the liquor permit.
Second.
Motion, Ms. Keller, second for Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And item 10 is consideration of resolution number 20-07. Elaine, if you'll please finish reading this one.
Resolution number 20-07, a resolution honoring the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Yeah. We have did you want to read it?
It's just a resolution that we're going to be presenting at the honor Martin Luther King breakfast. Thank you. Sorry, just lost it there.
Move for approval of resolution 20-07.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. And item 11 is the third reading of ordinance number 19-63. Elaine, if you'll read this on the record.
Ordinance number 19-63, an ordinance accepting the annexation of 43.847 plus or minus acres of land, more or less. Description and map are attached hereto as Exhibits A and B for the annexation known as the Evans Farm, Delaware LLC annexation by Andrew Wecker, agent for the petitioners.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of council, as the person in the room probably with the best remaining voice, I'll take this one. This is an annexation. This would be our third reading. This is one we tabled for a date certain, so it automatically came back on the agenda today. The reason it was tabled is we were and continue to negotiate with the applicants to resolve an issue wherein if under normal circumstances this annexation would be required to join an NCA. However, when they started the development, they put the property that would be annexed to the city in another NCA already. So we are negotiating an alternative payment route that would make the city whole, but also be amenable possibly to the applicant. We've been trading some numbers and some models with them, so our negotiation does continue. So at this time, it is not ready to vote on. I believe we have until March to hit that deadline for the end of the annexation. I'm not sure if this is going to be done in the next 2 weeks. There's no problem with going multiple readings. The members of the council who have been here a long time have seen very many readings before. However, if council is not inclined to continue to have it on the agenda, we could table it again, but I think since I don't know when the negotiations are going to end, I would probably recommend just leaving it on there as long as council doesn't want to vote on it without the applicant being ready to move forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dan?
Oh, and I instructed the applicant they did not need to be here tonight because they weren't ready to vote, so there's no point to be here.
And there's a game at 8 o'clock.
Yeah. I spoke too long, I forgot, sorry.
Darren, just correct me if I'm wrong, one note, because the annexation is required by the Ohio Revised Code, if council doesn't vote by I think it's your first meeting in March is
Yeah.
the last day in the Ohio Revised Code timeline. So if you were to take no action by then on the annexation, I think by code
It's rejected.
Reject.
Dave is right, so if we do not take some action, no action is a no vote.
Okay. Very good. Item 12 is city manager's report and update.
Just, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes having Bill go over the results of the Hall Drive pilot traffic calming initiative and really how that relates to the request that council received at your last meeting from a resident of Executive Boulevard for requests for stop signs. And just we wanted to just get some thoughts on that tonight in terms of how to proceed. So, and I've included some background information for council in the packet in that regard.
Well, really, the memos give all the details, really. So I can just summarize my thoughts, starting with Hull Drive. We didn't have high hopes that we're going to change any traffic volumes on the road, and none have changed. It's in the pilot program. Regarding traffic speeds, again, because of the nature where the speed is, anywhere between 29 and 31 miles per hour, very, very difficult to get people to slow down going that speed, because that's a typical speed we find in almost every neighborhood. And even after putting down the lines and narrowing the pavement, we weren't very successful in this particular case. Now, some of my staff wants to hypothesize that because most of this, or probably 80% of the traffic is cut through traffic, that they really don't care about their impact of the neighborhood because they're just using the road to cut through. So maybe the lines aren't very effective there, but maybe in an application where the majority of traffic traveling on a road is in their neighborhood and they feel a little more responsibility to themselves and to their neighbors, to the children, to slow down. So in other words, they don't necessarily want to throw out the concept of the narrowing, but on the whole drive, because of the makeup of the traffic, not very effective. So on Hull Drive, we have options to do additional or more advanced traffic calming type piloting, and that would be the addition of the speed feedback signs with some limitations on it so they don't become the scoreboard as they've been referred to. But the speed is only shown so high, and then it stays stable. You can't see if you can go 80 miles an hour with these signs. So that would be one option we could put on there. Another one is, and I've been talking with our fire chief, is potentially piloting, it's not in the memos, but potentially piloting what we call speed cushions, which are like speed bumps, but they have cutouts for emergency service vehicles. So the vehicles can traverse them without any impacts or having to slow down necessarily, but cars are forced to go over them if they stay in their lane. There's some, many communities are trying these out. Some are finding out that people just tend to swerve around them. Others find out anytime you put in a speed table or speed bump like this, or even a stop sign that's not really warranted, but you want to slow people down at that location, that speeds, as we found out in Grandview, just increase or stay the same in between those things. So unless you're going to put stop signs or speed bumps every 200 to 300 feet down a road, you're going to end up with the behavior of people looking at them as an annoyance, slowing down, and then speeding back up in between them. And then all the negatives you get with things like these speed cushions are the noise pollution, the air pollution, the braking noises at every one of them. Do you effectively slow down traffic in that one area? Probably. If you put 5 or 6 of them on a road, will some say, I just want to avoid that and go somewhere else? Maybe. And you don't know those answers unless you try them. But in general, all these things, trying to control traffic speed when the majority of people are driving at the speed they feel is responsible and safe is a very, very difficult thing to do. And we can try more traffic calming, and we don't want to necessarily throw it out because some people on Whole Drive like it. It looks like we did something, and some say it works, some say it doesn't. The speed cushions may have some impact in certain areas. I think our staff, our licensed staff, is opposed to trying to put up unwarranted stop signs that really goes against the adopted codes that the state of Ohio has accepted. And so the recommendations come back. We don't think we should put unwarranted stop signs in areas. However, as I mentioned in the memo, council does have the ability to overrule that decision if you feel it's important, and if we follow the guidelines that council established back in 2006 or so, to let the neighborhood speak. And if the majority of the neighborhood comes back and says, we really want this, then you can consider that and say, even though our engineers don't recommend this because it doesn't meet this criteria, we're going to authorize this anyways. That's how Grandview Avenue stop sign went in, against the recommendation, but with the neighborhood support. So in cases like Executive Drive, I mean, I've heard a little bit of complaint in terms of that one particular area, but I've also heard residents say, please don't put things along our road that are going to make it more difficult to travel up and down there. So that's the purpose on why the legislation was made and was added in the traffic calming guide, to give the neighborhood opportunity if they really want something and get together and the majority neighborhood says, yeah, we accept this, we accept the limitations that it imposes on ourselves, then it's an avenue you could take. But it goes against the recommendation as it stacks up to the code. So that's where we are on these. We're not opposed. We passed some resolutions tonight to kind of pave the way to allow us to do some things on some of these streets. We still have to do resolutions on Executive if we want to do some traffic calming there. And we've actually proposed, again, striping and speed back signs to see what they may do. Again, this pilot, we're trying to gauge the impacts of these. And until you put them in place and really get the metrics, we don't have the information to say, these just don't work. We've tried them. We put these in 3 different places for 2 years with no good results. So are we going to continue to do these things? And again, it just goes back to, it's very difficult to slow the average motorist down when they're going at speeds they feel are responsible. Would be far more effective in just hiring another speed enforcement officer, and that's all they do is speed enforcement and hand out tickets all year in the neighborhoods, because people getting a hefty ticket is probably more influential on them than a speed feedback sign or a line on the side of the road. And that we may get more out of that. So we always talk about enforcement, and the chief will tell you, out of all the things I had to do, it's not my top priority, so it's difficult. If we made it top priority with one person, maybe that would change behaviors in some neighborhoods if 50 speeding tickets were handed out in a week. So that's where we are on these things. It's not new news, I should say, with the exception of Chief Donahue maybe being receptive to piloting the impacts of what they're called speed cushions.
Can you
as opposed
explain
to
what the
speed
speed
bumps.
cushion is?
It looks like a speed bump, but it
It's
has
just much harder.
certain areas where it's not a bump in the road, where it's the same levels of pavement, but it's a lot wider. Those are spaced so the axles of a large fire apparatus could go through and not have to drive over the speed cushion, but a small vehicle would still hit either one side or the other side of it. That's why they call them cushions. I think it's just to come up with a name different than speed bumps, but they look about the same. A lot of them are pre-manufactured, they're rubberized products made of recycled rubber. They bolt to the pavement, and they're fairly
How
easy
high are
to
they?
install. 3 inches.
Oh, okay.
Very typical, like our profile speed bump, I think, is 3.5 inches. So it's very similar to that. So it's not like the bumps you see like in a commercial parking lot. It's very narrow. It's only maybe a foot wide, and if you drive over that any faster than a crawl, you damage your vehicle. These are designed that you could traverse them at around 10 to 15 miles an hour, fairly comfortable in a vehicle. But if you go over it at 20 or 25, you're gonna know it. It's going to be non-desirable to go over them that fast, which is why fire department doesn't want to go over them. But putting the cutouts in there is a way to maybe address that issue. So we can allow the runs to go at more of a run speed, or whatever that speed is, John, and without impacting that. But imagine you have these in there and people see, oh, that's how you go over them. So we'd probably put a yellow center line anyways, and signs that say don't go over the yellow center line. And so everything we do, there's going to be, community's going to counter it. Drivers and motorists are going to counter it with undesirable behavior. So that's why we can put stop signs in. And the example in Cobblestone, we did, but we have nearly 75% of the folks that go to that stop sign don't stop at that sign. They either roll through or crawl through. That's not what you want to do at a stop sign, because it really gives the false sense of security to the people sitting there in the other direction or trying to cross the walk, pedestrian, children, elderly. So there's reasons behind these things. I know it's frustrating to live in a community or live on a street where people do go 32 miles an hour. But trying to correct that behavior is very difficult for us to do with technology. We can try things, we can pilot things, which is what we're suggested. I just can't promise you're gonna find a way to get people to go 25 miles per hour.
So Bill, I guess I have a kind of a long-term question for you and maybe for Dave. So what I hear you saying is you got a lot of options, but none of them really work.
Mm-hmm.
So when we engineer these neighborhoods, when they're constructed, we engineer them fairly wide streets by Central Ohio standards, and a lot of those streets end up being through streets through the neighborhood. If none of the traffic calming measures work, should we think differently about how we engineer these streets to begin with? Because we've got, I've been set on parking safety for several years, and it's rare to have a parking safety meeting where we don't get complaints from neighbors about either too high traffic volumes, in the case of Hull Drive, thousands of cars a day, or speed. And I understand what you're saying, but if we continue to build these things the way we've been building, and we're gonna continue to have problems that we can solve, do we need to start thinking differently about how we engineer these neighborhoods to begin with?
Well, we are, to be frank, we are looking at new collector roads and actually piloting and putting obstructions in the road by design. The short piece of Boulder Drive has some obstructions built into it. The Pennock extension, we want to build something within the curved area to slow people down. And the road that goes south of Cheshire off the roundabout, I forget the name of it, but we're trying to build in traffic calming into that. Exactly those type of things would not just painted it, but physically limit, constrain the pavement, the edges, because that's a true risk to have a narrow edge versus a painted edge. So the narrow edges or single lanes, maybe it's only 12 feet or 10 feet of travel lane. There is a perceived risk on that, and people do tend to go slow, especially through the curved sections where people tend to drift across and use all the pavement on curved sections of road to keep their speed up. When you physically limit that through islands, center islands, then you really, in a sense, have to slow down to maneuver those. So we're building those things. We are doing exactly that. The existing collector street network is, we're, like most communities in Ohio and across the nation, are dealing with this same type of issue, that people just don't want to obey the speed limits or don't feel it's unsafe at the speeds they're driving. And so that's the typical motorist behavior. And it's a very difficult thing to correct something that people feel it's okay to do. So it's a good point, Ken, and we are moving in that direction. I wish we started that 20 years ago, but.
I just got a complaint today from someone that lives in the meadows of Carson Farms, where the streets, it's at the very entrance of Carson Farms, the little, I don't know what you call those, like freestanding condos.
Yeah.
Those roads are real narrow, and she made a complaint and wants speed bumps. They're private roads there, but, so it doesn't seem to be an issue that's necessarily not happening on our narrower streets either. I just think people in general are going too fast everywhere.
Everybody's in a hurry all the time.
Yes.
You
And
know,
I.
you can check out the Kroger's parking lot. and pretty much
Yes.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's trying to control the uncontrollable, which is human behavior. We can all do our very best to try all these different measures, but at the end of the day, until people themselves slow down, all we can do is try.
Right, and one thing just to keep in mind in all this discussion, no one wants, when someone complains, they don't want to hear this, but if you take the stop sign, for example, there is criteria. Are you having a lot of accidents because of this? Are you having pedestrians hit because of this? And largely in all of our complaints, the answer is no. We don't have these terribly unsafe streets. If we had streets without sidewalks, where people are having to force into streets, that's a really different situation. But we have sidewalks almost everywhere in town, where pedestrians separate themselves from motor vehicles. And one of the first things we do on any complaint is pull the crash history. And we just don't have big crash histories on these, some intersections in town, obviously, but on streets like Hull Drive, we don't have crashes happening every week there. So it's always dangerous when someone drives a car. It's more dangerous when someone speeds. But is the evidence saying we got this real problem that needs to be resolved? And then trying to implement certain things that really have minimal effect to it. And then you do these things and it's like, well, you didn't do the right thing. I'm like, well, what is the right thing when it comes to this issue? It's a very difficult thing to control. We're willing to continue to pilot some of these techniques to see what kind of results we can get, like the speed feedback signs. We had some result when we did the pilot, moved it around. We did see ability to drop speeds anywhere from 1 to 3 miles per hour. But you're talking about maybe getting someone that goes 32 to go 29 and a 25. Is that going to resolve the issue? No, but we can get some information about it if we do some limited piloting of these things, and maybe a limited piloting on something like a speed cushion.
Councilman Schaefer, I'd just say from a macro design standpoint, I agree with everything Bill just said. And we are changing some of the ways that we're designing those roads, and some of the bump outs or bump ins, I guess depending on your perspective, could work at some of the intersections as well to give that perception of narrowness. But we also want our roads to connect. And so that was one of your comments. And so to have sort of endless cul-de-sacs that don't connect, A, could make you drive faster, but B, create congestion and just people going faster in other locations. So we want those, and that's one of the themes we're hearing coming out of the comprehensive plan as well. Not that cul-de-sacs are bad, they have their place in the design world, but that we want our streets to have that connectivity. And Bruce will tell you that whether we like it or not, kind of echoing Lisa's comments, I mean, I've sat here for enough meetings and listened to him and Bill both say that most of the speeding in the neighborhoods are from the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So it's not particularly cut through, but I mean, sort of we've met the speeding enemy and it is us kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's more education or something, more than some of these kinds of approaches. Bill and I have also talked about some things we talk in a planning world called tactical urbanism, and this is sort of cheaper, more inexpensive ways to experiment with some of these hay bales and that sort of thing, and paint, where we can get some real world feedback, not only from you, but from our citizens in the community to see, does a bump out make sense here? Because you may just get as many people on the other side that say it's hindering me turning at the intersection or something like that. Just thought I'd put that 2 cents in.
Bill, I do appreciate
Mhm.
all that you guys do to try and come up with potential solutions, and I'm assuming at some point we'll hear back from the two that we just approved tonight and get your feedback on those.
Mhm.
So I know it's a difficult job, but when we hear these citizen complaints, if there is something we can do, of course, we'd like to be able to do it. So I appreciate you at least coming up with potential solutions.
I appreciate that, and we do, Dave does and I do, we both scan the internet probably weekly, and our magazines and things we get, looking for any, I'm getting people's YouTube videos from down south today that have tried some of the speed cushion things and listened to a number of testimonies, and we do look for these things, because like I said, it's a national issue, but no one's found like this magic solution, right? But we do tune in to try to find new things, and we're always willing to. We want to try to serve the community. The community would really be helpful in this if they would slow down.
Yeah.
So in terms of Executive Boulevard, the recommendation from staff is contained in Jessica Ormeroyd's memo to Bill and Matt, which was in your packet at the last part of that. The last paragraph talks about recommendations for that particular roadway, and
Very
that-
similar to the
yeah, it's really
striping
the
and.
same approach
Mhm.
to take that, and but it's ultimately I wanted,
Yep.
council to give us direction on that, but, I mean, speeds are 33 to 34, there's been no accidents, so, I think that's what.
Right, there was the accident the one gentleman spoke about, and we obviously looked into that and researched it, and that was someone who drifted across the road in the late evening, and indicated that a deer jumped out in front, and they had to avoid the deer, and ended up running into a car. So, whatever the story is, I mean, we gotta believe what's in the report, but,
Saved the deer, didn't we?
yeah, it wasn't the road that caused it, or necessarily speed that caused it, it was the deer that caused it. But if we want to move forward, we would bring a resolution back on executive as well with Jessica's recommendations, and continue piloting these in neighborhoods where maybe the majority of residents live there, and maybe that plus some information we can provide them, they can understand that this is a reminder, if anything, at minimum, it's a reminder to slow down when you see these lines.
Can we reach out to their HOA to see if they could give us some feedback?
Mhm.
Maybe they have, a website page or something, and,
Or help with education too.
Yeah, I think the education campaign is,
right.
George had mentioned that earlier, that sustained education can be helpful. Public service announcements,
Yep.
those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, when we look at the unwarranted stop signs, we have two examples in town where we put them in, they don't work, neither one. So, the definition of insanity is continue to do something that doesn't work over and over again, so. Being a resident of Executive Boulevard, I don't have an issue with speeds down through there most of the time. And having worked from home for about the last 7 years and looking out there every day as people drive by my office window, it's always that handful of people. 85% of the people are fine. Some vehicles, because of their size or their noise, give the perception that they're maybe going faster than what they are. School buses are a great example of that. It's big and they're noisy and people, they're speeding. It's not really. But it comes down to, everything that we talk about, and everything that Bill mentions from traffic calming and all these traffic calming things, they're addressing symptoms, but they're not addressing the underlying problem, which is people feel that they can safely drive that speed. And that's a fallacy. I was leaving Ace Hardware, coming down their service drive by Burger King the other day. Lady was sitting there at Burger King going east. She was stopped at the Burger King stop sign. She was looking at somebody who was entering, going towards Ace. As soon as that person passed, she pulled right out in front of me. She was about 25 feet I was about 25 feet from her when she pulled out in front of me. I was only doing 20 miles an hour. Hit the brakes, but at 25 miles an hour, you're traveling 30 feet per second. So, bam, tagged her. And that's where people just don't realize, even if you're going 20 miles an hour, you still have, you know, so if little Timmy or Lassie runs out in front of you from behind that car, you may think you're going a safe speed until something like that occurs. And that's where that whole public education and getting people to realize that. You know, in a perfect world, we could send everybody to some type of traffic safety school, and it would make the chief's job a lot easier because people wouldn't drive like idiots. Well, at least some of them would. But really, it comes down to the problem is getting people to recognize how to drive safely. And whatever we do, you're not going to impact that 10% or 15% of the people that are just stupid.
Okay. Do you have anything else for your?
No, just a couple things you were gonna mention regarding
Okay.
work sessions and whatnot.
All right, council comments, we'll start there then. Mr. Jones?
I have nothing.
Mr. Kaufman?
Nothing to,
Ms. Keller?
I had a committee report.
You do?
I
I'm so
did.
sorry, what'd you have a meeting on?
So I met with the YMCA.
Oh, I apologize.
No, that's okay. It wasn't an official committee report. It was just a
Okay.
meeting that I was invited to. They continue to make excellent progress. Really excited about some of the things that they have going on. Their rate decrease took effect, and I got an update that people do not have to ask for that 20% discount. That's been automatically applied to all Delaware City members. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
I want to say one thing. I went to the daddy-daughter dance put on by the YMCA this Saturday, and I was just really impressed with all the dads, so many dads in Delaware. I think we got a great community, and I just thought it was a good event.
Very good. Mr. Farrell?
I'd just like to bring up, I think we've heard a number of reports now and seen others that have talked about development in the county. I think it would be worth pulling together a group of the different municipalities, townships, whatever, that are affected by it. And I think Tom brought this up at the work session last Monday too, just to see from the government perspective, what are the things that we should be doing to be a little more proactive about it versus waiting for people to come and tell us. So I'd like to bring that up. I don't know what that starts, but maybe start a process of getting us involved in something like that.
Okay. Duly noted.
Oh,
You're up.
I got nothing.
I'll save it, I don't have anything.
You don't have anything? Okay, on February the 3rd, we're gonna do a council work session. Don't, before you get upset, in lieu of a retreat. So we usually, to the new guys, we have a retreat in March. It's a Saturday morning, we're gonna give that up. And this work session will be the goals from last year's retreat to see where we're at and how we're moving forward, and if we're moving forward in the way that we all approve of. So that's good news, right? We'll start it at 6:30 on February the 3rd. You looking at me for Elaine, is that right?
Nope.
I'll be there. On February 5th, there's an opioid discussion at the library, and I've asked Corey to go for that. I think Elaine registered him. I have
Correct.
4 other meetings this week, so he's gonna cover that one for me. On February 10th is the joint meeting with city schools. So we're gonna need to start that meeting at 6 o'clock. And then we will walk down to Willis for that meeting.
So we're starting here at
If
6.
that works, I mean,
I'll be out of town, so I'll be asking to be
You're out
excused.
Okay.
On
you're
February
right,
10th.
anyway.
Okay. Does 6 o'clock work for everybody else?
Yeah, but we're starting here at 6 and then walking?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They start theirs
That
at
just
6
gives us,
also.
yeah.
Okay.
And then the budget meetings that Elaine sent out for tentative dates, we're gonna hold off on setting those until our new finance director comes in, so we find out exactly when here's year end. We don't wanna put too much pressure on him right off the bat, but once he gets a better feel, then we'll set those dates. I know you all want them as soon as possible, so you can make plans later, but we just think that's the fair thing to do. And then I also wanted to mention that the ambassador from Paraguay, the U.S. ambassador of Paraguay was here Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday last week, signed an agreement with Ohio Wesleyan about bringing some students here at a reduced rate with some scholarships. It was very, very nice. I had dinner with them Thursday night and then lunch again on Friday, and I was there for the signing. So they are really looking forward to looking into a sister city with us here, with the connection between President Hayes, and they're just very excited about that. And I think that's everything covered. And it is 8 o'clock. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned at 8 o'clock. It's gonna take a few minutes to get home to get the game, sorry. As best I could.